Hi everyone, how are you? You've been asking me many legal questions on my apps through email, and guess what? I'm not an attorney, so I've always had to turn you guys away and say, I can't really answer legal questions, I don't do that. But guess what? Just for you guys, I have a real live attorney, Steve Pipenger. He's been practicing law in New York for 10 plus years, and he's going to answer all our questions. And by the way, I have so many questions that I've saved from all of you guys, and I'm going to ask him. So, thank you for being on my YouTube channel, Steve.
You're welcome.
The most recent question I got is, what is the difference between an LLC and an S Corp?
Well, let me start by saying there really is not, that's not the right question to ask. The right question to ask is, what's the difference between an LLC and a corporation? Now let me start by saying there's essentially two kinds of corporations. You have an S Corp and you have a C Corp. An S Corp is a corporation. I'll tell you, there's a couple requirements or prohibitions for S Corps. First of all, an S Corp can only have 100 shareholders.
Okay.
All of the shareholders have to be individual people. That means companies cannot own shares in an S Corp.
Okay.
All of the shareholders have to be either permanent residents, like a green card holder, or a citizen. Okay. S Corp versus, so those are some differences between an S Corp and a C Corp. The biggest difference is the way it's taxed.
Yeah.
An S Corp is taxed on, it's not taxed.
It's a pass-through.
It's a pass-through, correct.
But actually, I actually know the difference between the S Corp and the C Corp, but not the difference between the S Corp and the LLC sort of eludes me. I was trying to explain it to someone the other day, and it's actually a harder distinction.
Right. So let's talk about the difference between an LLC and a corporation.
Yeah.
Corporation is, ownership in a corporation is in shares, common stock, preferred stock, and anything you want to do for the type of stock. You can have different classes of stock. An LLC, it's similar. People who own ownership in an LLC own, they're called members, they're not called stockholders. The main difference is that with a corporation you have various what they call corporate formalities. You have to have a shareholder meeting. You have to have board of directors meetings, even if you're a single shareholder corporation. An LLC, it's a lot more fluid. You don't necessarily have to have those formalities. So, and it's completely customizable. I'll give you a for instance. In a corporation, if a person owns 10% of the stock, say, they have 10% of the voting rights. Yeah. Assuming it's that class of stock. An LLC is a little bit more flexible. You can say, hey, I own 10% of the LLC. That could entitle me to 10% of the income, say, but only 5% of the voting rights. Or you might have where it's one member, one vote, as opposed to one share, one vote. Yeah. You understand the difference? Yeah. So those are the big differences. It's the formalities and the customizability.
So if I was to sum it up, it really feels like, because the LLC is like a newer kind of structure, they made it kind of like almost just more flexible in how you want to structure it. Correct. Internally. Because you can write your own partnership agreement between your co-founders or business partners, and it just gives you far more flexibility. Right. So is there a reason then to go S Corp? What will be the reasons to go S Corp, and what will be the reasons to go LLC? Because it feels like LLC is more flexible.
Well, I think it's more flexible. The other thing too is that taxation of an LLC is like a partnership, so it's passed through. If you have more than one member, if it's one member, it's taxed like a sole proprietorship. Right. Okay. So what's the advantage? Well, I think if you're a company intending on going public, say at some point, you start up, you intend on going public, it's probably behooves you, if you're going to choose between an LLC and an S Corp, those are your choices. Yeah. Become an S Corp, because it's easier to go from an S Corp to a C Corp, because that's really more a matter of an election on taxes. Yeah. Right. Whereas from an LLC to an S Corp to a C Corp, say. The fact of the matter is, a lot of venture capital folks they're more comfortable with a corporation because they know it. You know, you're not going to find shares, or not shares, but we'll call them shares. Shares of membership units, whatever they are for an LLC, they're not sold on an exchange anywhere.
So the complexity of the LLC can also be like its enemy, because it's...
I think, yes, because it's just not as familiar.
Right.
And, you know,
it's less structured.
Yes, it's less structured. Somebody who invests in an in a company, they're like, I want to know my shares, and you know, I'm a preferred, or I'm this, or I'm that.
Right.
The other big difference, particularly in New York State, not many states have this publishing requirement. That's very few states. Yes. I think it's only 2 or 3 states that have it. And it's frankly a complete waste of money. That is one thing that you kind of look at and go, why be a corporation? I mean, why be an LLC when I can be a corporation? Because if you're an LLC, particularly if you're doing business in New York City, where the newspapers are very expensive.
It's $500 actually, yeah.
At least 500, because you have to publish in 2 papers.
But together they're about 500, yeah.
Okay, and it depends on the borough that you're in.
Yeah.
So if you're in Manhattan, and I've seen people do this, and it adds $1,000, $2,000 just to the setup costs.
Yeah, and it's benefit.
And it's absolutely a worthless. There's no reason for it. If you've ever seen any newspaper in New York City, in Manhattan, say, or even in New York City, look at the papers where these things are, and all they look like is little tombstone ads.
Nobody reads them.
Nobody reads them.
Yeah.
So, you know, I tend to think that the only reason that requirement is there is because newspapers had very good lobbyists in Albany when they were writing the law.